Hi, welcome back to A Moment with Marta. So today I want to talk about families living with autism. What does that look like? Um, what is that a picture of? So autism is an invisible disability. So a lot of times people on the spectrum get told, or families get told, oh, they don't look like they have autism. Autism doesn't have a look. It's all, with how the brain processes information. And so there's quite often, kids like mine that don't have a look per se, but it looks different for each family. I've got two kids on the spectrum. My son is moderate to severe. My daughter is high functioning. They both have very differing needs. I've got a stepdaughter who is 17. She lives primarily with her mother in Kansas, but she comes down pretty frequently. So the way autism affects our family is, when there's anxiety, we all feel it. When there are sleep issues, my husband and I definitely feel it. It's very common for people on the spectrum to have a hard time with sleeping. Either they have struggles with insomnia, or in my son's case, he doesn't struggle with getting to sleep, but he struggles with staying asleep. And we were told by the psychologist that diagnosed him that there are times where the way the brain processes, like the vitamin D that you get from the sun, it could be processed opposite of those that are neurotypical. And so his brain, when it should be relaxing, is almost going into high gear, so it's not allowing him to stay asleep. My daughter, she has a hard time just kind of settling down and going to sleep. I struggle with settling down and going to sleep. My mind just races, and so a lot of times there can be sleep issues, and it affects the whole family. When you're a parent of a child with autism, especially a child that is not able to communicate their wants or their needs, it's tough because you want to help them, but you don't know what they're thinking. You have to find other ways to communicate, to figure it out. For example, my son would start to have these behaviors and would just start to act very on edge, and a lot of things would stress him out. He would have more anxiety, and we would try everything we could to figure out what was going on, see if there was something physically happening first, if he was having GI distress or anything of that nature. And we finally figured out that he was having headaches. And the way we figured that out was, since he's not able to verbally communicate what's going on, he's not really able to answer questions either. The questions cause him to have more anxiety. So if I were to ask him, do you have a headache? He couldn't say yes verbally. He might be screaming it in his head, but he's not able to access that language and verbally say it. So it tends to exacerbate his anxiety. So what we figured out was his left ear and his left cheek would just get bright red. And so I would take his temperature, and I would take it on his right side and it would read normal, and I would take it on his left side and it was just slightly elevated. There wasn't a fever, but I think he was having headaches. I think he gets migraines and has some allergy headaches and maybe some tension headaches. I get all of those. So I think that he was experiencing that, and so it was a lot of stress put on my husband and myself trying to figure out how best to help him. We were feeling so helpless. We finally were able to figure that out, and now we have that physical clue. But there are other times where we don't have any kind of physical clue. We don't know what's going on. We have to just kind of run through the list of, okay, is there something physically going on? Is he coming down with a stomach virus? Is his stomach upset by something he ate? Is he having other kinds of GI distress? there's a big correlation between the gut and the brain. And so a lot of times people with autism tend to have GI issues, whether it's constipation or struggles with processing things or excess stomach acid or excess yeast. Lots of different kinds of issues can run with the gut. And so that's one of the first things that we do is we try to eliminate something physically going on. And then if it's not physical, if he's not hungry, if he's not sick, if he's not in pain or hurting, then it's like, okay, we have to look at what happened prior. What was it that triggered this reaction? And it could be something as simple as somebody said something and it hurt his feelings, but he doesn't have any other way of communicating that to us other than feeling stressed and maybe having some stress go-to phrases. For my daughter, she's able to verbally communicate with us just a little bit more, but when she's tired, when she's sick, when she starts to get frustrated, she has a hard time accessing that language. And so a lot of times her tone gets raised. She starts to fuss some, and we have to, again, just kind of go through that checklist of, okay, what's going on? What happened before this? Is there something physically happening? And so there's a lot of detective work involved. There's a lot of stress. Our family in particular, we have a lot of dietary restrictions. My daughter is allergic to gluten, dairy, eggs, and peanuts. Peanuts is a very severe reaction. She doesn't go into anaphylactic shock, but it's not a mild reaction by any stretch of the imagination. And so, and then my son is allergic to gluten and dairy. And so, we have to prepare meals that adhere to all those dietary restrictions. There are things like dyes, like red dyes and yellow dyes that aren't good for people on the spectrum. They're very sensitive to it. So you have to read a lot of labels. You have to be careful about what kind of nutrition your kids are getting. There are some kids that really struggle with sensory issues when it comes to textures or smells of food. And so they don't eat very much. So that causes stress on the family, and they worry about the health of their child. So for my family, my kids, thank goodness, I'm very blessed, are good eaters. I always kind of joke that they have no choice but to be healthy with all of their dietary restrictions, but it makes it very difficult to go out and eat as a family or to travel because we need to pack their food ahead of time. We need to have a restaurant like Chick-fil-A that has gluten-free options. And also dairy-free, egg-free, peanut-free, all that stuff. So those are just a few examples of how it can really affect the entire family. Neurotypical siblings, sometimes they don't get as much attention because their siblings with autism just have specific needs that the parents have to focus on. And so it's a balancing act of trying to make sure that the needs of your neurotypical children are met as well. So there are lots of families that have that struggle. And then there's just the guilt. You have guilt as a parent anyway. It just kind of comes with the territory of, you not knowing something or you not doing something the correct way. And then when you add on additional challenges like having a child that is not able to communicate with you, then there's more guilt on not knowing what to do, on not knowing how to help them. Sometimes there's just behaviors that crop up, maybe due to adolescence, due to hormonal changes, and you're at a loss, you don't know what to do, and you feel helpless and hopeless and defeated and deflated. And parents out there, I get it. I have been going through a particular season right now. I believe that my son is going through some hormonal changes and growth changes, and it just has affected his anxiety levels. They've just really peaked, and your heart hurts for your children when your children are hurting, and you want to ease their suffering and ease their pain. And so by proxy, everybody else's anxiety is heightened. So autism, it's a disability that affects everybody that's within the family, within the household in various different ways. And of course, we want to do everything we possibly can to support the individual or individuals, in my case, that have autism. But it can be a balancing act when it comes to the neurotypical children in your household, like my stepdaughter, or when it comes to trying to just have your family experiences, like being able to go out to eat as a family or being able to go to the movie theaters, stuff like that a lot of times you might take for granted. Those are things that are very difficult for a family that is living with autism. There might be some sensory sensitivities, and it just doesn't allow you to be able to go to certain public places due to crowd, due to noise, due to sights, overstimulation, what have you. And so that's a big reason why I feel passionate about helping to spread autism awareness, to help support families, to help community understand better so that way they can support families, and we can create even more environments that allow families to be able to kind of have those experiences like any other family. So anyway, that's just kind of a little blurb with autism and the family. I appreciate everybody that watches and all of the positive feedback that I've received. And if you have any topics that you would like me to cover, just shoot me a message and I'd be happy to put that in a list of things that I go over each week. So until next time on A Moment with Marta, thanks. Bye.